Tonight we journey into the forest mists of ancient Hokkaido, where the scent of damp cedar, scorched bear fat, and smoked salmon clings to your clothes before you even find the fire. You crouch under a low thatched roof, eyes adjusting to the glow of embers. There's no metal pan, no cast iron skillet, just a handful of stones, some driftwood, and a technique passed down without a single written word. The air is cold, but the fire crackles with intent. And you're about to cook something. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is over there. I love seeing those pop up. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the foothills, squinting through snowfall that isn't quite ready to become winter. The boots you wear now aren't yours, they're sealskin, padded with dry moss, and they squeak faintly as you walk. Beside you, an elder named Culinary, a name meaning darkness, moves with soft certainty, leading you toward the village. A line of birch trees sways like skeleton dancers, and ahead, smoke lifts in blue spirals into the pale air. When you arrive, it's not a bustling kitchen that greets you. There's no clanging of pots, no white-tiled counters. Just a longhouse made from planks and reeds, with its central hearth still glowing from last night's cook. The Ainu people don't start fires in the way we think of it. They preserve them. 4 generations. Culinary kneels and cradles a wooden ember box wrapped in woven bark. Inside is a coal still alive, humming with stored heat. She blows on it gently, feeding it a curl of dry grass. Flames rise like memory. There's no lighter fluid, no gasoline, just friction, patience, and respect. Fire is a being here, not a tool. You gather branches from a black alder tree, the bark smooth and oily in your hands. You scrape the wood with a shard of stone obsidian, maybe, and the scent it releases is sharp, peppery. That's what makes it good kindling. You didn't know that before. A fire pit is formed, no circle of rocks, just a shallow trench between 4 stones, blackened by 1,000 meals. Smoke fills the room and doesn't leave. There's a hole in the roof, but it's more suggestion than ventilation. Your eyes sting. Your clothes reek. And that's just part of dinner. Historians still argue whether the Ainu hearth, called irori, was more for food or for the gods. But sitting here, with heat soaking into your knees and Culinari's soft chant curling around the flames, it doesn't seem like a choice. You can feel her whisper land in your bones. The Ainu don't just cook over the fire. They cook within it. They layer fish bones and pine needles, wild onions and wood ash into a kind of nested warmth that can hold heat long after the fire dies. When you bite into a piece of charred yam, still gritty with soil but unbelievably sweet, you don't taste the fire, you taste the memory of it. Outside, a child sharpens a stick to skewer river eels. Not for fun, for practice. She works methodically, watching her angle, her pressure. You wonder how old she is. 7, 8, and already entrusted with a meal's beginning. You're handed a small carved cup. The liquid inside smells like smoked cedar and earth after rain. It's Tonoto, a fermented millet drink, lightly alcoholic, mildly fizzy, and slightly sour. Ainu fermentation, you'll learn, is a quiet revolution. But that's for later. Tonight, you sit near the fire and notice how the walls of the sais, the traditional house, are stained in smoke trails. These aren't accidents. They're signatures. The fire isn't just survival here, it's a language. Every meal is a phrase. Every char mark a word. The hearth is the heart. Not just architecturally, it's dead center, but spiritually. There are rules. You don't step over it. You don't throw things into it. You don't speak certain names near it. The flame hears, and sometimes it answers. Quirky fact. Here's one. Ainu children used to blow on burning embers to talk to the fire spirit, kamui fuchi. If the sparks danced, they were happy. If they hissed, you'd better apologize. You try it. The embers swirl. Maybe they're listening. You pull a piece of dried salmon from above the hearth. It's been hanging there since fall. It's curled and tough, but rich with oils and salt rubbed in by hand. No refrigerators. No vacuum sealing. Just wind, smoke, and gravity. It's not delicious by modern standards. But it is satisfying in the way that survival food often is: dense, direct, and earned. Suddenly, the door opens, and the cold spills in like a rude guest. A man enters, his arms full of branches and an enormous mushroom. He nods without speaking. The mushroom is yamabushitake, lion's mane, and it smells faintly like shrimp and dirt. Into the fire it goes, to roast, crackle, and bloom. You're beginning to realize that nothing here is accidental. Every method has a history, and every flavor a function. The fire isn't a novelty, it's a teacher. One last thing before you doze off again. Ainu people believed that the hearth fire must be kept burning while a family member is out hunting or fishing, so their spirit could find its way home. Even today, some homes in rural Hokkaido keep a ceremonial ember for that exact reason. And if you think that's a little superstitious, well, wait until we bury meat underground. You wake to the sharp scent of moss and something sweetly burnt, your nose twitching like an animal's. Outside, the sun has barely crept above the hills, casting blue shadows across the frost-dusted ground. But there's already movement. Kane, your host, nudges you softly with a bundle of twigs. Mokorikurum, she says simply, and you follow without asking questions. Not because you understand the word, but because there's something about her tone that promises a meal, and maybe a little magic. You walk to a clearing near the riverbank, where the ground has been dug open like a mouth in the earth. A shallow pit waits, lined with blackened stones, some of them still steaming from last night's fire. Around the edge, a few men and women work silently, wrapping food in layers of bark, ferns, and what looks like snow moss. This is Mokorikurum, the Ainu earth oven. And today, you're making buried dinner. There's no metal spit. No pan. No smoke. No flame. Just heat, sealed underground like a secret. The process begins with rocks, large, flat ones, pulled from the river and heated in the fire for hours. You help lift one with a split log tong and drop it into the pit. It hisses, cracking the frost beneath it. That sound. That's your appetizer starting to cook. Next comes the layering. Moose meat, wild duck, mountain yam, burdock root, even a few foraged chestnuts, all wrapped in bamboo leaves and tied with twine made from bark fiber. Each package is placed gently atop the stones. Then comes more greenery, more ferns, and oddly enough, a wet mat of snow. The snow is the trick. It doesn't cool the food, it steams it. The sudden contact with the hot stones creates a low, even steam that lingers under the insulating dirt. The snow keeps the temperature steady, the flavors sealed, and the nutrients preserved. A prehistoric pressure cooker. Then, soil. The pit is covered, pressed down gently, and left for hours. Maybe even all day. And now comes the hardest part of Ainu pit cooking, waiting. You wander, ears full of wind and stomach full of noise. But patience is part of the recipe. The food buried underground will soften, meld, and develop layers of flavor that no modern oven can replicate. It's not just heat, it's time itself, doing the seasoning. Historians still argue whether Mokorikurum began as a necessity, cooking during harsh winters without open flame, or as a ceremonial practice used only for special events. But either way, it's genius. And the science holds up. Slow-roasted root vegetables release more sugars, tough meats break down into tender silk, and everything gains that haunting earthiness only clay and moss can provide. Here's a quirky twist. Some Ainu would bury a small carved inau, a sacred prayer stick, alongside the food. The idea that even the spirits needed a taste. And no, you're not allowed to eat their portion. Unless you like waking up with a nosebleed and a family of misfortunes. To pass the time, you help carve bowls from hollowed birch. The knife you're given isn't metal, it's made from obsidian and tied to a deer antler. Every slice is awkward, slightly jagged, but you begin to appreciate the handmade rhythm of it. There's no perfection here, only usefulness. A spoon that works is a good spoon. A bowl that holds is a fine bowl. And if it leaks, well, that's what moss is for. A child named Ritar, his name means white, brings you a handful of steamed nuts mashed into a sticky paste. It's flavored with something sour and piney. You try it. It's not bad. Then you find out the sour comes from crushed ant larvae. You stop chewing for a moment, but eventually keep going. Because honestly, it's kinda tangy. Finally, the pit is uncovered. Steam rushes out, thick and sweet like a forest sauna. You reach in with bark-mittened hands and retrieve a bundle. It's warm, damp, and smells like heaven's compost pile. You unwrap it slowly, layers of moss, bark, and bamboo folding back like pages in a burnt book until you find duck meat, glistening and dark, sliding off the bone with just a nudge. Around it, chestnuts have split open, and roots have caramelized into soft, sugary slivers. You take a bite. It's strange. Not in a bad way. In a deep way. Like something your DNA remembers but your brain can't place. Earthy. Sweet. Smoky. A little sour, from the natural tannins in the bark. Everything cooked together, nothing wasted. Even the bones are soft enough to chew. Kana laughs softly as you lick your fingers. She points at the pit. This, she says, is how we eat in winter. When snow is louder than fire. That sentence stays with you. And here's something you didn't expect. This method wasn't exclusive to Ainu culture. Versions of pit cooking exist all over the world: Polynesian Ainu, Native American clambakes, even Celtic fire pits. But the Ainu version? It's one of the only ones to use snow and ferns as deliberate thermal tools. That's not primitive. That's culinary engineering. While you finish your meal, someone tosses leftover bark and fish bones into the now cooling pit. They'll turn to charcoal, later dug out and used as soil enhancers. Nothing is wasted. Not even the ash. As night creeps in again, you sit near the pit, which now glows faintly with dying embers. Someone places a carved wooden bear on the edge, as if the fire needs company. You don't ask questions. You just watch. And maybe, as the wind rises and your fingers grow cold, you start to think, buried meals taste better when you're a little lost, a little tired, and surrounded by people who know how to listen to the earth. You wake this time to the low rhythmic slosh of water and the distant crackle of fish skin crisping over coals. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs, and it echoes off the river like a skipping stone. You sit up, stretch, and rub the sleep from your eyes only to find yourself already on the move again, trailing behind a group of Ainu fishermen as they wade thigh-deep into a freezing current. The morning fog hugs the surface of the river, curling around every limb, every branch. It swallows the sound of voices, leaving only splashes and the occasional shout. In their hands, the men hold long spears tipped with barbed bone. The target? Salmon. Specifically, chum salmon, or shirazake, a fish that, to the Ainu, was more than food. It was inheritance. Salmon wasn't just caught. It was greeted. Ritual chants were spoken before the hunt began, asking the kamui, the salmon spirit, to return year after year. And once the fish were caught, they weren't cleaned and filleted like in some chef's fancy YouTube short. Oh no! You're about to learn how the Ainu cook fish bones, heads, spines, and brace yourself, sometimes the intestines, all of it. A burlap net heaves up from the river. The salmon is still twitching. It's quickly dispatched, bled, and cleaned, though cleaned is a relative term. Rather than discard the innards, the Ainu keep them. They'll be fermented or boiled. The bones, saved for broth. The skin, dried. The meat, smoked. There's no salmon left behind. Not even the eyeballs. Back at the riverside hearth, a makeshift rack of green branches is set up. The fish are splayed open, salted, and hung above a slow-burning fire. They dangle like wind chimes, fat dripping, smoke wrapping them like a blanket. This is sake, smoked salmon. It'll stay here for days, even weeks, until it's dry, leathery, and nearly indestructible. But you're not eating that yet. First, someone hands you a carved wooden bowl filled with a cloudy broth. Floating in it are pale bones, a fish head split neatly down the middle, and a few seaweed strips. The smell is intense, smoky, sour, and slightly metallic. You hesitate, then sip. It's deeply savory, almost haunting. Like miso had a weird, fishy cousin who grew up in the woods and isn't afraid to punch you in the throat with umami. The bones have been simmering for hours. The marrow seeps into the broth, creating a silky, oily film on top. This is kanisap, or bone broth, boiled with patience, not seasoning. Quirky tidbit: the Ainu believed that salmon bones, when properly treated, could contain ancestral energy. Some even kept certain bones aside, drying them to use in amulets or tools. You're literally sipping a family heirloom. Nearby, someone is preparing meffin, which might test your courage a bit more. It's made from salmon kidneys, fermented in a cedar container for several weeks until it turns into a dark, paste-like condiment. You're told it's an acquired taste, which is code for, this might ruin your day. Still, you try a finger's worth. It tastes like soy sauce that fell into a compost bin and clawed its way out stronger. But it grows on you. There's richness, salt, even a kind of sweet bitterness that reminds you of black olives or anchovy paste. And weirdly, you want more. Historians still argue whether the earliest Ainu fermented fish techniques were influenced by northern Siberian tribes or developed independently. The process, burying salted organs in cedar, letting them mature for weeks or even months, was both a preservation method and a flavor maker. And yes, the fermentation included the bones. Speaking of which, you help prep another dish, siknak, a salmon stew where bones are not removed. Instead, they're softened, boiled long enough that even the vertebrae break down and add thickness to the broth. When served, you're expected to chew the bones. Gently. Respectfully. If you spit them out, you're wasting the spirit of the fish. You start with a tiny nibble of spine. It's not unpleasant. Chalky, tender, faintly sweet. Like salmon candy with a crunch. Culinary watches you approvingly, and you feel strangely proud of your evolving palate. What was unthinkable yesterday is tonight's comfort food. One fisherman named Pakno, his name means gill, which is either ironic or prophetic, tells you a story while sharpening a knife on a whetstone. He says his grandfather once caught a salmon so large it couldn't fit in the smokehouse, so they roasted it in a hollowed-out birch canoe lined with hot stones. "We ate for 5 days," he chuckles. You don't know if he's joking. You glance around. Dozens of smoked fish hang above. Some are twisted in the middle, some hollow-eyed and curled like commas. All of them have names carved into the wood above them. Not human names, descriptive ones. First Snow, Tail of Thunder, Silent Tooth. Because yes, every significant fish could be given a name. And every named fish got a story. You close your eyes for a moment, sipping more bone broth, and realize you're eating history, chewing through vertebrae that once sliced through glacier water, boiled into a broth that might have fed your ancestors if you were born 500 years earlier. The fire pops, the wind rattles a few hanging bones, and someone begins humming a tune. It's not a lullaby. Not exactly. More like a river's song, looping in your head like the current itself. Before you drift again, you catch one last odd moment. A girl crushes dried fish scales into powder and sprinkles it into a pouch. For winter, she says. A flavor bank, saved for leaner times. You think about that long after the river fades from view. You wake under a roof made of reeds and bark, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, musk, and something faintly gamey. Not unpleasant. Just wild. There's a softness to the morning light, filtered through smoke that never truly leaves the house. Someone's humming low by the hearth, and you realize Kane is already awake, hunched near the fire with something strange in her lap, something dark, wrapped in bark and twine. You crawl closer. She unties the bundle slowly. The smell that escapes is intense, meaty, sour, a little peppery. It hits your nose like an old leather satchel stored next to a spice rack. Inside, bare meat. Aged. Dense. Slightly shiny. This isn't a fresh kill. This is meat that's been cured under the floorboards for weeks, even months, in a technique the Ainu call fermented preservation, or rako. No vinegar. No refrigeration. Just darkness, controlled airflow, a steady temperature, and faith. She slices a piece with a curved bone knife. The outer bark layer peels back, revealing rich muscle streaked with fat and darkened with age. She hands you a piece. You hesitate. Of course you do. But hey, you've survived fish kidneys, so why not this? You bite. It's chewy, deeply savory, and pungent in a way that makes your nose tingle. Not rotten. Just bold. Like blue cheese that's been bench pressing in a cave. There's a tang from the natural bacteria doing their quiet work, and a whisper of sweetness, maybe from the sap in the bark wrapping. You chew slowly. Thoughtfully. Like someone taking communion. You don't realize it, but you've just tasted size meat, a sacred, almost forgotten method that used smoke, dry air, and tree bark instead of salt or brine. This was survival cuisine, yes, but also an art. The Ainu were never big on preserving things for fun. They didn't have the luxury. Every preservation method was about the long haul. Winters could last half the year. And when snow swallowed the forests, you needed meat that didn't need tending. Something you could unwrap like a present when the rivers froze over and traps ran dry. But here's the twist, this wasn't just put it away and forget it food. The rako method involved ritual, observation, even a touch of mysticism. Certain woods were favored for wrapping, birch for sweetness, oak for strength, pine for its antiseptic oils. Some families buried the wrapped bundles under moss beds, others tucked them into rafters high above the smoke line. Historians still argue whether this practice was purely about function or if it evolved from spiritual traditions around death and the afterlife. After all, fermented bear meat sounds eerily close to buried ancestor meat if you squint at the cultural edges. And yes, there are whispers of taboo. In some stories, it's said that only women could prepare fermented meats, and only during certain moon phases. Why? Because the process mimicked childbirth. The meat, wrapped, hidden, warmed, and finally born weeks later, was symbolic of life being coaxed from death. You don't say that out loud, though. Not unless you want to be laughed out of the longhouse. Nearby, another preparation begins. A freshly hunted hare is being skinned, carefully, with reverence. The Ainu believe animals offer themselves to be eaten, but only if treated properly. Mistreat the body, and the spirit might not return. So the organs are removed with care. The heart is wrapped and hung above the door. The intestines, cleaned and braided, are dried to use later either for sausages or as thread. Then comes the curing. The meat is rubbed with ash. Not salt ash. The alkali in the ash helps prevent bacteria and draws moisture out. It's packed into a wooden box and left near the fire. Over days, it will change, darken, dry, grow complex, and edible. You're handed a thin slice of an older piece, hair cured 3 months ago. It looks like jerky but chews like cheese. A little tough, a little smoky, with that same earthy whisper you tasted in the bear. You nod politely and try not to think about how long it's been since refrigeration seemed like a birthright. Quirky fact, some old Ainu households kept a meat cache under the sleeping mats, where body heat would aid in the slow curing. That's right, you might be napping on top of your next dinner. Makes your memory foam mattress feel a bit sterile, doesn't it? Later that day, a feast is prepared using several of these aged meats. But the highlight isn't the bear, or the hare. It's something called seps, a fermented fat pudding made from bear tallow, pine bark powder, and snowmelt. It's bitter, gelatinous, slick on the tongue like warm candle wax. You don't ask how it's made. You don't want to know how it's made. But the old men slurp it with glee, so you try it. And honestly, it's fine. Weirdly filling. Like if grits and axle grease had a baby. But here's where it gets surreal. Before the meal is served, a woman steps into the center of the house and places her hands over the hearth. She begins to chant slowly, rhythmically, her voice low and even. She's calling on the kamui, the spirit of the kitchen fire. Not just to bless the food, but to awaken its memory. To remind it who cooked it, who waited, who preserved. The Ainu believed the soul of the food must be treated like a guest. That memory lives in flavor. That time is the best seasoning. So as you chew another strip of bark-wrapped bear, maybe it's not about liking it. Maybe it's about honoring it. You finish your plate slowly, silently, and you realize, forgotten methods aren't just lost recipes. They're stories that stopped being told. You're back at the hearth again. Not because you left, but because the fire never really lets you go. You've started noticing how it breathes, how it settles, how it pulls smoke in strange, curling shapes through the beams above. You sit cross-legged, your fingers still sticky from bear fat, and something sizzles above your head. That sound. That's dinner getting smoky. Really smoky. Today, you're learning about chittatap, a word that might sound cute, but trust me, it's a full-contact culinary experience. You're about to make it with a rock, a knife, and a willingness to smash every edible part of an animal into a fine, meat sludge paste. Sound delicious? It actually kind of is. You're handed a deerskin bundle. Inside, fresh squirrel meat, a handful of squirrel organs, crushed bones, and some fat that smells vaguely nutty. Not because it's seasoned, but because this squirrel's last meal was probably an acorn buffet. You mash it all on a flat stone with a heavy club-like pestle. The rhythmic chopping and grinding is almost hypnotic, kaitar-tap, 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 and now you get the name. It's literally the sound of food being pulverized into survival stew. There's a strange comfort in it. In Ainu culture, chittatap was both food and function. It wasn't always about flavor. It was about using everything: bones, marrow, sinew, scraps. If you could chew it, you could mash it. And if you could mash it, you could eat it. Once your chittatap reaches the consistency of a lumpy pâté, Kana scoops it into a bark bowl and mixes in wild garlic, pine ash, and, surprise, a tiny handful of crushed, smoked grasshoppers. You give her a side eye. She shrugs. Protein, she says, deadpan. The bowl is placed in the smokehouse, a high, slatted structure above the central fire. Long strips of meat, fish, and chittatap patties hang from rods like wind-dried laundry. The fire beneath burns slow, and not for cooking. Just for drying, curing, smoking. Here's where things get interesting. Some of those meats hang for months, even up to a year. The low heat and constant smoke act like ancient preservatives, killing bacteria and driving out moisture. It's one of the oldest cooking tricks in the book and one of the most brilliant. Historians still argue whether the Ainu learned this preservation style from their neighbors in Sakhalin, or if it developed independently, born of necessity and cold mountain air. But the result is the same: meat that can last a winter without spoiling. Some strips are glossy and black, hard as wood. Others, softer and pale, still weep fat onto the fire. You touch one and instantly regret it. Your fingers now smell like venison incense. For days. You sit nearby, chewing a dried slice of something that once had antlers, and marvel at the layering of smoke. It's not one note. It's complex. There's the resin of pine, the sweetness of cedar, the musk of charred animal fat, all swirling together like a flavor fog. And then there's the charcoal. Remember how we used hot stones in the pit? Well, now those same stones are cooled, crushed, and sometimes added into food, yes, really, as a form of ash seasoning. It's gritty, yes, but it adds a smoky mineral edge, and the Ainu believed it had cleansing properties, too. Detoxifying. Protective. Especially when eaten with organ meats or mushrooms. You're handed a chewy stick of smoked organ sausage, liver, lungs, and intestines stuffed inside stomach lining and hung over a fire for 2 weeks. It's intensely savory, a bit bitter, and vaguely floral from the birch smoke. You take one bite, pause, and go for a second. Because it works. Somehow. Fun fact, the Ainu didn't stop with meat. They smoked berries, too. Especially cloudberries and dogwood fruit, which were gently roasted and smoked until they shriveled like raisins, then rehydrated in broth during the winter. Yes, smoked fruit. Sounds like a hipster food truck, but this was happening centuries ago. Someone hands you a ball of sakapchittatap, bird paste, this time. It's roasted over open flame, crackling as the skin crisps. A bit salty, a bit gamey. And that slightly sweet finish. You're told it's from mashed grass seed added to bind the meat. You chew, trying not to think about the feather you just swallowed. The best part. The chittatap isn't even the main event. While you chew, another bundle is unwrapped from near the coals. It's thick, rectangular, and wrapped in deer hide. Inside, a block of hardened animal fat, mixed with smoked mushroom and ground roasted acorns. A kind of prehistoric protein bar, rich and dense enough to make your molars ache. And you suddenly realize, this is their pantry. This smoky ceiling full of hanging meat and bark-wrapped bundles. That is the grocery store. It's all shelf-stable. It's all prepared with fire, air, patience, and zero electricity. The original meal prep. You reach for a third slice of smoked venison. And Kane grins. Now, she says, you won't die in winter. You laugh, but she's serious. Because this is what survival cooking really looks like. No recipe cards, no Instagram photos, no waste. Just smoke, heat, fat, bone, and the kind of knowledge you only pass on through demonstration and taste. Before the day ends, someone offers you a final bowl. A chittatap stew. Thick, brown, slightly oily. You taste wild garlic, pine ash, liver, and possibly rodent. It's deeply comforting, like a meaty miso mixed with regret and protein. And it lingers. So when you finally roll into your bedding, belly full of bone-mashed, ash-salted, squirrel-flavored dinner, you realize something important. This kind of food doesn't ask if you like it. It asks if you respect it. And honestly, you do. You're belly down in the forest now, nose brushing damp earth, trying to dig something out of the soil with a stick. Beside you, an Ainu woman named Pirika, her name means beautiful, is already 10 steps ahead. Literally. She's crouched near a cluster of leaves, gently pulling up a gnarly root that looks like it could either cure a headache or kill a horse. You hold up your prize, a small knobby bulb that smells vaguely like horseradish and old socks. Pirika grins, nods, and then smacks it from your hand. "That one's poison," she says cheerfully. Welcome to Ainu foraging, where nearly everything in the forest is edible or deadly, or both. The only way to tell the difference: trial, error, and an alarming number of stories that start with so-and-so's cousin went blind for a week. Today, you're not just foraging. You're learning how the Ainu turned bitter, toxic, or borderline inedible plants into safe, nourishing meals. The forest is their pantry, but only if you know how to cook it properly. Pirika hands you a root called tukusa, or horsetail. It looks like asparagus designed by an alien. Eaten raw, it'll tear your stomach to ribbons. But roasted, soaked, and mashed, it becomes part of a medicinal gruel served to pregnant women and warriors with busted ribs. You watch her drop it into a split-log trough filled with water and ash. The soaking will last days. It pulls out the oxalates, the bitter compounds, the enzymes that otherwise make this plant a digestive nightmare. After that, it'll be dried and powdered. Another root, uric, is even trickier. It contains cyanogenic glycosides. You definitely don't want that in your lunch. But the Ainu had a solution. They'd boil it in water collected from cedar bark. The tannins from the cedar neutralize the poison. Historians still argue whether these detoxification techniques came from direct experimentation or oral knowledge passed down from a much older Arctic or Siberian food tradition. Some say both. Either way, it's a chemical ballet performed in bark pots over open flame. You walk deeper into the forest and find something even weirder. A tree trunk marked with shallow slashes. From it, a syrupy sap oozes. Pirika catches it with a birch cup, lets it sit for hours, and mixes it with powdered ash and ground nuts. The result? A paste called sayo, eaten as a sweet paste if you get the ratios right. Too much sap, and you're seeing stars. Too little, and it's just bitter jelly. Quirky fact: the Ainu once believed that every plant had a voice. Bitter plants screamed when harvested. Sweet ones whispered. So for centuries, people would apologize to certain roots as they pulled them, murmuring thanks so they wouldn't anger the spirit inside. Pirika still does this, whispering to the soil before cutting tubers free. You crouch by a creek next. There's a cluster of green shoots beside it, wasara, a wild herb that smells like chives but burns the tongue. Pirika shows you how to bury it in cold sand for 3 days. Not to rot it, but to mellow it. Time works as a chef here, too. You try a raw piece and immediately regret it. Then you try a mellowed one. It's rich, oniony, and surprisingly sweet. Cooking wild Ainu plants is never a one-step process. There's always a ritual. Always a waiting period. Always a method that sounds more like wizardry than cuisine. Pirika pulls out a sack of wild chestnuts. You think, finally, something safe. She laughs. Of course not. These chestnuts contain high levels of tannins. If you eat them raw, they taste like wood glue. But the Ainu knew how to fix that. The nuts are shelled and placed in a net made from twisted bark fiber. Then they're sunk into a stream and left to soak for 10 days. Moving water pulls the tannins out. After that, they're sun-dried and ground into flour. It's called satni, a staple thickener in old Ainu soups and dumplings. At this point, your respect for plants has turned into mild fear. You realize that your idea of natural food has been heavily sanitized by grocery shelves and warning labels. Here, there's no label. Just knowledge. And consequences. Later, you return to camp. A pot hangs over the fire, bubbling slowly. Inside is a thick gruel made from foraged root powder, wild onion paste, ash, and a touch of acorn flour. It smells grey. Not bad. Just neutral. You sip it. It's earthy. Gritty. A little sweet at the back. Comforting, in a weirdly blank way. Like if oatmeal had been invented by cave monks. Then you're handed a wedge of something else, a baked flat cake made from ground bark and fern root starch. It's surprisingly good, nutty, slightly spongy, with a texture like chewy banana bread. You take another bite. Pirika nods, approving. And for dessert? Smoked berry paste and a few pieces of candied grass stalk, boiled in honeysap reduction and dried on hot stones. You chew slowly, stunned. It tastes like the woods trying to be polite. Quirky aside, some Ainu would make a fermented root beer from poisonous roots after detoxifying them, then age it underground in bamboo tubes until it fizzed. The fermentation killed off remaining toxins, and the drink, it was sour, medicinal, and probably a little alcoholic. You raise your hands. I surrender, you say, mouthful of bark pancake. Pirika laughs. You're not dead yet, she says. And she's right. Because what you've eaten today, root gruel, bitter nuts, toxic herbs turned safe with time and ash, was never meant to delight. It was meant to nourish. To keep you alive. And in that, it succeeds brilliantly. So tonight, when you lie back under the stars, you don't dream of cake or curry. You dream of a soup that almost killed you, but didn't. You're stirring something. Slowly. Carefully. The spoon is carved from driftwood, dark with age and smoke. The pot is bubbling, the fire is low, and the smell wafting up is rich and unfamiliar, meaty, herbal, slightly sour. It's not quite stew, not quite broth. It's ohor. And unlike anything else you've tasted, ohor is not just food, it's a ritual in a bowl. Kane sits beside you, peeling thin slivers of dried fish with a stone blade, dropping them one by one into the pot. Each motion is deliberate, almost meditative. You follow her lead, adding bits of root vegetable, aged wild onion, dried mushrooms, and what might be duck fat. The ingredients are simple, but the proportions? That's where the real wisdom lies. Ohor isn't a recipe, it's a reflection. Of the season. Of the family. Of the mood. One day it's hearty and heavy. The next, clear and sparse. It's a what we have kind of soup. But that's not a sign of poverty. It's a philosophy. A way of cooking that adapts to the land and the moment. You learn quickly that how you stir it, when you add things, even how long you wait before serving, all of that matters. Not because the soup will curdle, but because the spirit of the soup is watching. The Ainu believed that food had intention. Especially soup. That it carried memory, that it could hold sadness, joy, or even sacred energy. You stir a bit slower after that. Historians still argue whether ohor originated as a ritual dish served to the gods or a simple peasant meal that gained spiritual meaning over time. Either way, the result is the same. This isn't just a bowl of food, it's a ceremony. Pirika arrives with a bundle of greens, wild spinach and yams. She crushes them between her palms, releases a bright green juice, and stirs it into the broth with a prayer under her breath. Not a loud chant. Just a whisper. Something like, "May this feed both body and soul." You try a taste from the ladle. It's surprisingly subtle. Not salty. Not punchy. More like warmth in liquid form. Layers of earthy bitterness, gentle sweetness from the yam, and a rich umami from the dried fish. Every sip lingers in a different way. You're not even sure if you're hungry anymore, but you can't stop. You serve yourself a bowl, and notice Kane set aside a small portion in a bark cup. She carries it outside, places it carefully on a flat rock near a tree stump, and bows. You follow. "It's for my mother," she says simply. "She passed last spring." And just like that, you understand. This ohor isn't just for the living. It's also for those who've left. The Ainu believed that food connected worlds. That certain meals could cross the divide between here and the beyond. Offering soup to a spirit wasn't symbolic, it was sustenance. The dead still ate, still drank, still sat by the fire. Sometimes, a bowl of ohor was left out all night. If it cooled too fast, the spirit was displeased. If it remained warm until morning, it meant the guest had stayed. That's a lot of pressure for a broth. You sit again, this time next to an elder. He tells you about bear ohor, prepared only during specific rituals when a bear cub raised for months was sacrificed to send its spirit back to the mountain god. The soup was thick, fatty, unfiltered. Served in silence. Drunk as a kind of communion. You shift uncomfortably, unsure how to feel about that. But the elder shrugs. It's how we said thank you, he says. To the bear. For choosing us. He offers you another ladleful, this time from a pot still simmering with deer and mushrooms. You sip again. And again, that layered warmth. This version has pickled greens in it, slightly sour, tangy on the back of your tongue. Someone must have stored those greens from last autumn. That means this ohor carries time, too. You look around and realize, everyone is eating the same dish, but no two bowls are identical. Some have more fish, others, more root. Some have oil floating on top, others are clearer. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Ohor is like memory, shaped by who makes it, and how. Quirky fact, some Ainu added a few strands of hair or a small wooden carving into ceremonial ohor, believing it carried the identity of the person it honored. Literal personalization. You're glad your bowl is hair-free tonight. Later, you help clean up, though cleaning here is more like a respectful ritual. The pot is rinsed with warm water, wiped with leaves, and dried in smoke. No soap. Just heat and patience. The spoon is set aside in a hollow log. The soup leftovers. Fed to dogs. Not as scraps, but as sacred shares. In many Ainu communities, dogs were seen as spiritual companions, guardians, sometimes even reincarnated relatives. You lie back near the fire, your stomach full, your mind still swirling with the memory of soup that tasted like it had feelings. And as your eyelids drift down, you swear you hear the last bit of broth in the pot simmering softly, like it, too, has something to say before sleep takes over. You're woken at dawn, not by a shout, not by a rooster, but by the smell of smoke and something oddly sweet. Not sugar sweet. Smoky sweet. Earthy. Like if caramel had a campfire phase. You shuffle out of your makeshift bedding, rubbing your eyes, and you see her again, Kane, this time kneeling by a fire pit, carefully rotating a thick slab of something dark and glossy over glowing coals. What is that? You ask. Seizen, she says, smiling. House food. Turns out, you're about to learn the Ainu art of preservation. Unlike your freezer, the Ainu had smoke. And time. And sometimes, bugs, which they didn't exactly like, but learned to keep at bay with cleverness and birch tar. When you live in a land of long winters and scarce hunting months, making food last isn't just a luxury. It's survival. That slab on the coals. Smoked salmon belly, cured weeks ago, salted with birch ash, and hung high above a smoke shelf where fish slowly darkens to the color of midnight. You sit beside her and notice the racks overhead. Strips of meat hang in gentle curls. Flat cakes are tied in bundles. A dried bear's paw dangles near the doorway like some culinary wind chime. None of it smells rotten. Just ancient. The Ainu used dozens of preservation methods, depending on the food. Smoking was the most obvious apapiku, usually done inside the sais, house, where the hearth fire never died. But it wasn't just to dry things out. It infused food with sacredness. The smoke came from specific woods, alder, birch, or Japanese Judas tree. Each added its own touch. Each kept the wrong kind of spirits away. You ask about the fish first, naturally. Kane walks you through it. First, it's gutted and cleaned, then stuffed with salted plants or rubbed with tree ash. It's split, pinned on a stick, and left near, but never directly in, the smoke path. After 2 weeks, it becomes ruib, a kind of sashimi jerky. Eat it raw in thin slices, icy cold. Chew long. Let it melt. Quirky fact: some Ainu used their bare hands to warm frozen ruib slices against their cheeks before serving. No joke. A sign of care and a built-in body thermometer. Meat was another story. Deer, bear, even fox, though the latter was rare and mostly ceremonial. Meat was dried over slow fires, yes, but sometimes also buried. Not to rot. To age. The permafrost acted like a natural fridge, and months later, they'd dig up the meat, shave off the icy top, and cook it in stews. Historians still argue whether this fermented meat technique was learned from neighboring Arctic cultures or developed independently. The debate grows murkier the more you chew on a piece of elk jerky that tastes like smoke and cave secrets. Back to the rack. Culinary shows you a bark-wrapped bundle of nuts. These were soaked in stream water for weeks, dried in sun, then bundled with crushed roots to prevent mold. They'll last all year. When they need flour, they crack a few open and grind them between hot stones. Then there's the berry paste. Imagine jam, but dark, fibrous, and slightly tangy. Soto, it's called. Made from mountain grapes, crowberries, and Saskatoon berries mashed with smoked birch bark and ash. It's spread thinly on rocks, sun-dried until leathery, then rolled into tight spirals like prehistoric fruit roll-ups. And the best part? No sugar. Just fruit, smoke, and patience. You ask how they kept pests away. Kane grins and points to a tiny pot near the rafters. Inside, dried mushrooms mixed with bear bile and crushed mint. The smell is indescribable. Bugs hate it. Spirits, apparently, respect it. You back away. There's also the bark cellar. Outside the house, buried just under the frost line, sits a hollow log covered in moss. Inside, precious things. Salted trout skin. Old root flour cakes. A small jar of pickled lichen. And, strangest of all, a single egg, wrapped in clay. It's been aging for months. When it's cracked open during winter, it'll smell awful and taste. Well, you'll let them be the judge. You sit again by the hearth, watching as another woman lifts a bare thigh from its smoking hook. It's blackened, hard as driftwood. She slices a bit off, soaks it in warm broth, and hands it to you. It's tough. But the flavor? Deep. Musky. Strange. The kind of thing you'd expect to be chewed slowly while someone tells you a story that ends in a ghost. You ask if they ever preserved dairy. Kane laughs. We don't do cows, she says. But some wild nuts were ground into creamy pastes that mimicked milk fat. Others were fermented into something almost like cheese. It wasn't about missing dairy, it was about creating richness with what the land offered. And the land offered a lot if you knew how to unlock it. You taste a final thing, a chewy square made from mashed tubers, honey sap, and ground fish skin. It's sweet, salty, and bizarrely satisfying. Like a protein bar from an alternate timeline. You realize then, nothing is wasted. Not the fish bones. Not the leaves. Not the bitter peels or the charred ends. Everything has a place. A purpose. A process. You, on the other hand, have forgotten your Tupperware in the back of the fridge so many times it's basically a petri dish. Ainu preservation isn't about hoarding. It's about rhythm. Knowing when food is best. Knowing when it's enough. And knowing how to make it last, not in a plastic bag, but in memory, smoke, and sun. As night falls again, the fire pops and the smell of smoked salmon wraps around you like a quilt. You lie down, full of things that once walked, flew, or grew in defiance of frost. And you fall asleep wondering what tomorrow's breakfast might have been buried last winter. You wake to frost on your eyelashes and the low hum of morning songs, soft, repetitive, almost trance-like. The village is up already, and breakfast? Well, it's not what you'd call continental. Today, you're learning about a cooking method that doesn't use pots, pans, or even smoke. In fact, the fire isn't involved at all. You kneel beside Pirika near the riverbank, where a wide flat stone has been hollowed slightly in the middle. She places a mound of wet moss into the depression, sprinkles in a mix of crushed fish bones, sliced roots, and a handful of fermented chestnut paste. You watch, curious. Then she places a second stone, much smaller, over the top. Carefully, gently, like sealing a letter. This, she says, is how we cook with weight and time. You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing. You're beginning to learn. The Ainu weren't just hunters or fishers. They were culinary engineers, turning rocks, moss, water, and patience into tools most modern kitchens wouldn't dare attempt. This method, it's known roughly as Ishikarikani cooking. Literally, stone squash method. Over the next few hours, heat from the sun and the fermentation from within do the work. The pressure infuses everything. There's no flame, no sizzle, no bubbling sound. Just silence. You wait. In the meantime, you help prepare a different kind of dish, this one wrapped in bamboo leaves. The filling, mashed lily bulb, wild rice, dried squirrel meat, yes, squirrel, and a sprinkle of charred salt. It's folded tightly and weighed down with river stones in a wooden bowl. No heat required. In a day or two, it'll be tangy and soft, closer to cheese than meat. Fermentation is a friend, Kane says, handing you a bundle. Just don't let it turn into an enemy. She doesn't elaborate, which is somehow worse. Mainstream historians believe the Ainu adopted fermentation practices from early Jomon period innovations, thousands of years ago. But others argue these techniques were developed independently, molded by climate and necessity. The truth? Lost somewhere between the bottom of a moss pit and a sun-warmed rock. Later, you're shown another method, cold soaking. This one's brilliant in its simplicity. Large clay jars, filled with layers of fish and plants, submerged halfway in the cold river. The water acts like a refrigerator, slowing decay but allowing natural brines to form. After a week or two, the contents emerge tangy, soft, and surprisingly safe to eat. You try a bit of cold-soaked burdock root. It's sour, slightly fizzy, like a vegetable that's been partying behind your back. A little goes a long way. Then there's clay steaming. Now this one's exciting, mostly because it feels like you're building a food volcano. First, they dig a pit. Line it with wet moss and bark. Place the food, wrapped tightly in leaves, into the bottom. Then, they cover it with hot stones pulled from the fire, followed by another layer of wet moss and soil. And then, nothing. You sit on top of the mound for a couple hours, basking in the slow release of heat beneath you. Somewhere down there, tubers are softening. Fish is steaming gently in its own oils. And the moss is infusing everything with its dark, earthy perfume. Quirky tidbit, Ainu sometimes placed specific flowers in with the food, not for flavor, but for dreams. They believed certain herbs, when steamed and inhaled, could draw ancestors closer in sleep. You suddenly wonder what you'll dream about tonight. As the hours pass, the food is finally unearthed. Carefully, reverently, it smells faintly floral. You unwrap a bundle. Inside is a trout, soft as butter, infused with pine and moss. The meat peels away with a whisper. You eat with your hands. No plates. No silverware. Just fingers and bark scoops. Somehow, it makes it taste better. More grounded. More real. While you chew, Kane tells you about mako, a fermentation method so intense it's been called the blue cheese of fish. It's made by sealing fish in birch bark, burying it under heated stones, and ignoring it for months. The result? Soft, pungent, and rich. A delicacy for the brave. You sniff it once and decide maybe tomorrow. Historians still argue whether this technique predates contact with Russian traders or was influenced by Siberian preservation practices. Either way, the result is an ancient culinary dare. You help clean up, and everything, yes, even the moss, is reused. The pit is filled back in. The leaves composted. The stones returned to the river to cool. Nothing is wasted. Not even the steam. Someone holds a bit of moss over their face and inhales deeply, like it's eucalyptus at a spa. This is cooking as meditation. You sit back down near the riverbank and gently lift the lid off the weighted mossstone pile from earlier. The mixture underneath has transformed. It's warm, sticky, and deeply fragrant. You taste it, it's like umami pudding. Silky, nutty, with a ghost of fish lingering on the tongue. You expected something weird. What you got was delicious. You lie back on the cool earth, the scent of river moss and slow-roasted trout lingering on your fingertips. The fire didn't cook your meal today, but the wind, the sun, and the weight of stone certainly did. You feel oddly grateful for the reminder. You don't need flame to transform food. Just time. And trust. The stars are still fading when Kane nudges you awake again, no words, just a smile and a motion toward the woods. You stretch, spine creaking like an old floorboard, and follow her into the morning mist. You're headed toward the mountains this time, where a different kind of cooking awaits, hot spring boiling. Yes, you heard that right. The Ainu, especially in Hokkaido's volcanic regions, didn't just bathe in the natural hot springs, they cooked with them. And not like some TikTok camping hack with cup noodles in a geyser. This was a tradition, a technique, a science of mineral-rich, geothermal cuisine. You arrive after a short trek to a misty clearing rimmed with steaming pools. The air smells like sulfur and damp stone. It's warm here even in the chill of morning. And gathered near the edge of one shallow pool, a small group of elders carefully placing bamboo baskets into the bubbling water. Inside the baskets, duck eggs, fiddlehead ferns, wild mushrooms, and pieces of salted river fish wrapped in cloth. Kane whispers, "We don't season here. The spring does it for us." You sit by the edge, dangling your fingers just above the surface. It's too hot for comfort, but not enough to burn. The water here is rich in minerals like iron and magnesium. That means when food cooks in it, it absorbs something more, a taste you can't replicate over a fire. Mainstream historians often brush this off as an occasional curiosity, but newer archaeological evidence, particularly from Noboribetsu and Akan, suggests the Ainu used these geothermal kitchens regularly. Cooking this way reduced the need for fuel and added nutritional value. Smart, right? You watch as an elder slowly lifts a bundle from the water and unrolls it onto a flat rock. The fish inside is perfectly poached, tender, opaque, and shimmering faintly from the mineral bath. You try a bite. It tastes faintly salty, but also metallic, earthy, like licking a stone, but in a good way. A really good way. Then comes the egg. Soft-boiled, cooked slowly in the warmest part of the spring. The yolk is a deep golden orange, almost like molten sunset. It's rich, creamy, and oddly sweet. You notice something else. The Ainu treat this cooking place with reverence. No loud voices. No waste. No rushing. A low chant begins as another basket is lowered. You're told this spring is Kamui Chorus, a god-owned place. A spirit lives here. Cooking here is a kind of offering. Quirky detail. Some elders used to tie tiny bundles of herbs to their ankles when cooking near these springs, not for luck, but to keep certain spirits from following them home. Superstition or not, you notice Kane quietly tying something around her wrist. As you eat, she tells you of another method, one used in tandem with the springs, stone layering. This technique involved stacking food with hot stones, wrapping everything in bark or hide, and then letting the spring's warmth slowly infuse from the outside in. Like a geothermal lasagna. They've even created makeshift ovens this way, pits dug near the edge of the springs, filled with alternating layers of moss, food, and river-warmed rocks. Covered tightly and left overnight. The result? Flavors you'd never expect from such humble ingredients. You get to help prepare one: fish, nuts, chopped mountain yam, and dried crowberries. Wrapped in birch bark, pinned tight with sharpened sticks, and laid gently into the steaming pit. Kane presses down on the top, murmurs something to the earth, and covers it with a slab of stone. Tomorrow, she says. You wonder what your modern friends would think of this. Boiling eggs in volcanic water sounds like something you'd do on a dare, not as a spiritual morning routine. And yet, here you are, craving more. Historians still debate how widespread these geothermal techniques really were. Were they practical outliers or central culinary rituals? The evidence is buried in hot soil, scattered across crumbling cook pits and whispered in songs. But the taste lingers. The sun begins to rise higher, and a mist rolls down the hill, cool against your skin. You find yourself dozing again, full belly, mineral-warmed limbs, stone under your back. You think, this is what a hot bath wishes it could be. A full-body meal. Inside and out. You wake to laughter. A child runs past, carrying a half-boiled egg in their palm like a treasure. Someone's using a hollowed antler to scoop spring water for tea. Even out here, rituals remain. Then Kane offers you something new, a cup of stone tea. It's water from the edge of the spring, steeped with bark, nettle leaves, and something bitter you can't name. The taste is sharp, earthy, and strangely invigorating. Supposedly, it helps the body absorb the spring's energy. You glance at the bubbling pools and murmur, pretty sure I already absorbed a trout. Kane snorts. You sit together in silence, watching steam rise like ghosts into the treetops. No frying pans. No timers. Just heat from the bones of the earth, coaxing nutrients from roots and life from yesterday's leftovers. The cooking is slow. But you're starting to like slow. The next day, you wake to the sound of grinding, not metal, not teeth, but something ancient and rhythmic. Stone against stone. Ainu mortar and pestle work. You stretch, yawn, and wander toward the source, stepping barefoot across dew-soaked grass that clings like spider silk. Today, you're learning about the Ainu art of paste making, those dense, sticky, slow-cooked concoctions that sustained warriors and wanderers alike. Think energy bars, but made with muscle, moss, and mystery. Pirika greets you with a nod and offers you a fist-sized clump of something dark and shiny. Chew slowly, she says. You do. It's dense. Sweet, but not sugary. Smoky. Nutty. A little sour. What is it? She smiles. Everything. Turns out, this little lump contains powdered salmon skin, ground lily bulbs, crushed walnuts, fermented beans, dried mountain grapes, and a splash of birch sap syrup. It's called korpoka, a kind of all-in-one trail ration for long hunts or spiritual pilgrimages. You help make more, pounding each ingredient with a stone pestle in a wide bowl made from a hollowed stump. The texture transforms, coarse to creamy, dry to sticky. Your arms ache within minutes. Pirika, meanwhile, hasn't broken a sweat. Mainstream historical texts mention these pastes briefly, but tend to label them primitive food storage. Rude. These weren't just leftovers smashed together, they were meticulously balanced, nutrient-packed survival tools, designed for maximum energy with minimum weight. Plus, They taste way better than modern granola bars. No shade, but your trail mix has nothing on this. Culinary shows you another variation, tonoto paste, used in rituals. This one includes roasted millet, spruce ash, smoked bear marrow, yes, you heard that right, and the dried inner bark of a local tree. The result is thick, black, and earthy like edible soil. Served on flat bark plates and eaten with carved bone spoons. You brace yourself. It tastes like campfire pudding. Smoky. Unapologetic. Weirdly addictive. Quirky detail. The Ainu sometimes pressed these pastes into carved wooden molds shaped like animals or ancestral symbols. Eating them wasn't just nourishment, it was reverence. Swallowing history, bite by bite. As you stir a pot of slowly fermenting bean paste, someone hands you a carved ladle. Stir always clockwise, they say. Counterclockwise invites illness. You nod solemnly and make a mental note not to challenge ancient food superstitions before breakfast. Nearby, elders are preparing something more intense, ikameshi, or squid-stuffed rice. The squid, small and firm, is filled with half-fermented millet paste and steamed over pine needles. The result is rich, savory, and oddly tender. You watch as a small fire is lit under a bark-lined steamer. Smoke curls lazily into the morning air, and someone begins to hum. Cooking here is never silent. There's always a rhythm, a song, a chant, the grind of stone. As you chew on a freshly steamed squid pouch, Culinary explains another fringe dish, oak moss candy. It's made by boiling down moss and mixing it with birch sap syrup until it becomes a sticky, greenish jelly. When cooled, it's stretched into strands and dried in the wind. Kids love it. You try some. It's sweet, chewy, and tastes like a forest after rain. Historians still argue whether such moss-based recipes were actual dietary staples or reserved for famine times. Some argue the Ainu only turned to moss when hunting failed, while others suggest it was a regular treat like seaweed snacks today. Either way, you're strangely hooked. Later, you help prepare kurome mash, a dessert of sorts, made from black beans, roasted chestnuts, and fermented tuber paste. It's served cold, often with snow in winter months. Right now, it's chilled in a basket over the river. You try a bite. Imagine if chocolate met miso and shook hands over a bonfire. That's the flavor. Deep. Slightly bitter. Perfectly grounding. You're given the honor of shaping some of the paste into small rounds for storage. You press them into smooth, flat coins and place them on a woven tray to dry. You leave a fingerprint in one by accident. Pirika leaves it there. Now it knows you. The idea of food knowing you makes you pause. But here, it's not strange. It's respectful. Every paste, every mash, every ferment is a relationship. Between ingredient and time. Between hunger and memory. You're shown one final method, bark roasting. This one's wild. They take strips of edible pine bark, yes, really, and roast them on flat stones until they blister. Then they grind them into a powder and mix it with oily fish paste to create a spread. You raise an eyebrow. They grin. It tastes like fishy toast crumbs. But, in a good way. You laugh, and Kana laughs too. You're learning. You sit by the fire that night, licking the last of a sweet nut paste from your fingers. Smoke curls into the sky, and stars blink slowly into focus. You're full. But not just in the stomach. In the bones. In the memory. Who knew a spoonful of paste could carry centuries? It's well past sunrise when you follow Culinary and Pirika to the riverbank. Today, they say, is about preservation. Not preservation like glass jars and sterile kitchens, no, this is Ainu-style preservation, which means smoke, sun, salt, and sometimes a little magic. You begin with fish, of course, how could you not? The Ainu were, and still are, master fish preservers. This morning's catch includes salmon, char, and a particularly smug-looking trout that seems to know its days are numbered. The process begins with chitatap, not just a funny word, but a key method. You watch as Culinary expertly uses two blades to rhythmically chop the fish into a fine pulp on a wooden board. Chitatap, chitatap, chitatap. The sound is hypnotic. This minced fish isn't cooked. Not yet. It's mixed with ground herbs and pine ash, then shaped into small cakes and placed on racks above a low, smoky fire. They'll dry slowly for days, absorbing both the heat and the flavor of the smoke. These cakes, when ready, can last for months. Just add water and you've got a protein-rich stew base. You try it yourself. Your chopping speed is not great. The fish slumps against the board like it's giving up on you. Pirika laughs. Even the trout's embarrassed. Smoke, of course, is the true heart of preservation here. You're invited into a traditional Ainu home, long and low, with a central hearth that never truly goes cold. Strips of meat and fish hang above it in various stages of transformation. Salmon with the skin still gleaming. Bear meat, dark and leathery. Slivers of rabbit, curling at the edges. The smoke isn't just drying them, it's curing them. Infusing them with antimicrobial compounds, fending off mold, and lending each bite that deep, primal flavor modern jerky can only dream about. Mainstream historians agree that Ainu smoking techniques are among the most sophisticated in Indigenous Asia. But here's the twist, these methods weren't just for food. They also smoked herbs, garments, and even tools to preserve them against decay. Practical? Absolutely. But also deeply spiritual. Smoke, to the Ainu, purifies. Then comes sun-drying. You help lay out thin slices of mountain yam, burdock root, and lily bulb on woven mats. The sun is hot but filtered through tall pines, casting a soft, golden hue over the trays. The smell is sweet, faintly earthy. A breeze kicks up, and you have to chase down a rogue yam slice like it's a frisbee with an attitude. Some items are soaked in salt water before drying, especially meats. Culinary brings out a bucket of brine and dunks several thick bear fat slices into it before laying them flat on polished stones. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. For winter stew. You'll thank me later. Salt was precious to the Ainu, gathered from coastal spray, traded inland, or harvested from salty plants. They didn't waste a grain. And while they didn't preserve with sugar in the way some other cultures did, they had their own form of natural fermentation. Which brings you to the funky star of the show, sake. Not exactly wine, not quite vinegar, and absolutely not something you expected to taste before noon. Made from fermented berries and bark, left in sealed wooden jars lined with tree resin, it's sharp, acidic, slightly fizzy. You sip. Your face contorts involuntarily. Pirika nods solemnly. It means it's working. Historians still argue whether this was consumed purely for preservation or as a ceremonial drink. Some think it doubled as a digestive aid, others say it was a spiritual cleanser. Either way, your stomach's now in conversation with your pancreas. As the day warms, you help build a raised rack over a new fire pit. This one is for yakkamui, the so-called meat of the gods. Usually bear, marinated in ash, herbs, and smoked pine sap. Laid carefully on the rack, it will cure for weeks. When finally ready, it's shaved like truffle over hot dishes or nibbled in slivers during long hunting trips. One elder shares a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, slivers of this meat were hidden inside ceremonial dolls, gifts to the spirits that doubled as survival stashes. You glance at a nearby wooden figure and can't help but wonder if it's got a snack inside. Later, you're given a task: packing dried fish flakes into bark-lined pouches. These flakes, ultra-thin, almost translucent, are the foundation of ryuk, a powdered soup base. Add hot water, maybe a handful of dried greens, and boom. Instant comfort. You try a spoonful of dry ryuk straight from the pouch. It's smoky, fishy, savory like miso and campfire had a baby. Not bad. Then comes the biggest preservation flex yet, ice storage. Yep. In the right seasons, the Ainu cut blocks of river ice and stored them deep in insulated pits lined with straw and stone. Some say they even packed fermented foods in snowbanks, letting the cold enhance flavor over time. You hike with Culinary to one of these pits, now overgrown, but still faintly outlined by ancient stones. She touches the earth gently. "We kept taste here," she whispers. That night, you sit by the fire again, watching fish strips sway gently in the smoky breeze. The scent clings to your hair, your clothes, your soul. You think about fridges, microwaves, expiration dates. You think maybe we're the ones who lost something. You wake up groggy but warm, your clothes thick with the scent of pine smoke and salted air. The fire has gone low, embers glowing like sleepy fireflies, and just beyond the trees, someone's already moving, stoking coals, untying bundles of herbs, and grinding something aromatic between stones. Today is about wild flavors. Forest foraging, root-buried secrets, and ingredients so bitter they bite back. Forget restaurants. The Ainu didn't just cook, they coaxed, tamed, and wrestled flavor out of landscapes most modern kitchens would find terrifying. Culinary greets you with 2 handfuls of plants. One smells like onion, the other like wet shoes. Guess which one's food? You guess wrong. Twice. She laughs and leads you into the forest where cooking doesn't start with a flame, it starts with listening. You kneel to feel for soft moss patches hiding edible fungi. You snap twigs and sniff bark. You taste leaves like you're taking communion with the trees. The Ainu knew hundreds of wild edibles, yukon koi, or alpine leek, for example, chopped finely into broth for a deep savory hit. Kobushi, the forest magnolia, whose buds were ground and mixed into fish cakes for their sharp, gingery bite. You find some and chew one raw. It slaps your tongue awake like a cold shower. The process of turning these intense, sometimes borderline toxic flavors into edible delight is one of the Ainu's culinary superpowers. Mainstream historical records describe Ainu cuisine as harsh but functional. But that's lazy scholarship. The reality? It was balanced, layered, poetic. Like their use of tomamu, wild angelica. Left raw, it's eye-wateringly bitter. But boiled gently with river stones and mixed with crushed nuts, it mellows into something earthy, floral, almost tea-like. You try it spooned over wild duck, smoked and resting on birch bark. It's rustic fine dining. Michelin, eat your heart out. Nearby, Pirika prepares sikapo hor, a bird broth. Today's version includes wild pheasant, alpine berries, and sosa bamboo leaves. You help toss in slivers of bark and dried lily root. The scent is incredible, part woodland, part bonfire, part something primal. Then there's shikarib, a kind of sauce or dip made from fermented berries and tubers, sometimes with ground insect larvae for protein. Wait, what? You squint at the bowl. Pirika shrugs. Only sometimes. You hesitate. You dip. It's tangy, bright, like cranberry chutney with a whisper of funk. No larvae today, you hope. Quirky detail of the day? The Ainu believed that food prepared without singing would lose its spirit. So, as you stir, Pirika hums a soft, looping melody that curls around the pot like invisible seasoning. The soup thickens, bubbles, sighs. You're led deeper into the forest, toward a grove they call Kamuaminta, the god's playground. Here, only the boldest flavors are harvested. Celandine roots, pickled with river silt and left to ferment underground. Wild garlic flowers, bundled with snake grass and steeped into a thick herbal jam that goes over roasted fish. You try it on a bite of crispy perch tail. It zings like wasabi but finishes sweet, like someone added forest honey. Your sinuses are alarmed. Your taste buds cheer. Back at camp, Culinary is working on hassup, a seasonal delicacy made from boiled down nuts, usually walnuts or hazelnuts, mixed with fat and wild sorrel, then spread over roasted bark bread. The texture is gritty but the flavor, sharp, nutty, borderline addictive. You're allowed to help roast the bark bread. It's thin, slightly chewy, and smells faintly of vanilla and ash. You break off a piece, slather on the paste, and take a bite. Okay, you murmur with a full mouth, this might be the best thing so far. Historians still argue whether these bitter, bold condiments were flavor enhancers or medicinal tonics. Some believe Ainu meals weren't about pleasure, but survival. Yet sitting here, watching Culinary lick herb paste off her fingers and smile like a child at dessert, you're not so sure. There's joy here. Plenty of it. You're offered another taste, mekarep jam, made from cloudberries boiled with birch syrup and a pinch of ash for bitterness. It's spread on river rocks to cool, then chipped off like candy. You suck a shard slowly. Sweet. Tart. Smoky. Even sweets have bite here. As the sun begins to dip behind the pines, Pirika sets up the final surprise, a forest salad. No lettuce in sight. Just shredded spruce tips, sorrel leaves, pickled fiddlehead ferns, roasted tree bark, and slivers of fermented tuber. You expect a bitter mess. You get a fireworks. Every bite is a riot. Crunchy. Tangy. A little sour. A little sweet. It doesn't make sense, and yet somehow, it absolutely does. Like the forest edited your expectations mid-chew. You sit back, stuffed and dazed. You've eaten bark. You've tasted moss. You've chewed on things with more bitterness than your high school ex. And you feel amazing. Smoke curls upward. Soup simmers low. The forest exhales. The flavors still buzz on your tongue, half memory, half spell. You wonder if anything you cook at home will ever taste this alive. You wake up with sap in your hair, the smell of smoked pheasant in your nose, and the faintest sense that your taste buds have been permanently upgraded. But there's no time for a lazy stretch or second nap, not when today is about the rarest of Ainu cooking experiences, ceremonial feasts. These aren't just meals. They're conversations with gods, whispered through smoke and bone and broth. And lucky you, there's one happening today at Ayamanti, or bear sending ceremony. You try not to choke on your morning tea. Here's the quick version. A bear, raised with honor in the village, is ceremonially released to the gods. It's not something you watch lightly, but it's also not what outsiders usually think. This isn't cruelty. It's communion. The Ainu believe the bear is a divine messenger. Its life is sacred. Its death, even more so. And naturally, the feast that follows is just as sacred. Pirika helps you dress for the occasion in garments stitched with protective patterns, tiny repeating triangles and waves said to guard against illness and wandering spirits. You even get your face dabbed with soot for luck. You look like someone tried to barbecue a raccoon, but hey, tradition. At the ceremony site, smoke coils around wooden totems. Men chant rhythmically while women beat drums lined with deer skin. You feel the air shift, thicker, warmer, more aware. After the rites, the mood softens. People begin preparing the ceremonial dishes. First up, yuko ho, or bear stew. It's not what you expect. The meat isn't charred or shredded, it's gently poached with pine bark, wild mushrooms, bitter tubers, and sprigs of something that smells like eucalyptus. The broth is dark, earthy, slightly sweet. You're handed a bowl. You sip. It's deep. Complex. It tastes like forest soil and thunder and something you can't quite name, maybe reverence. Mainstream historians describe Ayamanti as ritualized consumption, But that's like calling a wedding just a cake-cutting event. This is food as memory, as gratitude, as theology. Then comes the Ainu roasted fish. The Ainu are sacred shaved sticks with curled streamers at the top, used as offerings. For the feast, skewers are made to resemble them, each carefully shaved and decorated. Fish are threaded through, basted with ash sap glaze, and slow roasted over ceremonial flame. The result? A crispy skin that cracks like parchment and flesh so tender it barely holds together. You bite into yours, and for a moment, all you hear is the fire and your own chewing. Nearby, elders prepare a dish called kimpa, a rare celebratory cake made from ground millet, mashed root vegetables, and forest berries. It's wrapped in birch bark and baked in hot stones. The outside chars, the inside steams into sweet, sticky perfection. Pirika hands you a piece. "Careful," she whispers, "the spirits love this stuff." You take a bite anyway. It's like mochi with attitude, dense, subtly sweet, and oddly emotional. Food that remembers things you never lived. Quirky detail: the final piece of kimpa is never eaten. It's offered back to the fire, wrapped with a piece of smoked bear fat and wild grass. The Ainu believe this completes the circle. What you take, you must also return. You help prepare side dishes too, wild garlic pickles packed in hollowed bamboo tubes, and roasted hazelnuts smashed into a kind of spiced crumble. They're sprinkled over dried trout to add crunch and depth. Someone brings a bowl of fermented birch sap wine and insists you sip. It's intense, slightly fizzy, kind of sour, and oddly herbal, like drinking a root cellar that's having an identity crisis. Historians still argue whether these feasts were more social than spiritual, or vice versa. Were they obligations or celebrations? Acts of devotion or diplomacy between humans and gods? Either way, they were unforgettable and incredibly rare. As dusk settles, the feast slows. Plates are passed with quiet gratitude. You watch people press food to their foreheads before eating, a simple, humble gesture that somehow makes your own chewing feel clumsy. You're handed a final dish, romu o ho, a ceremonial porridge made from chestnut flour, pine ash, and fermented root mash. It looks like oatmeal on a bad day. But one spoonful in and your mouth floods with warm, nutty sweetness, chased by a whisper of smoke and something ancient. It tastes like lullabies, like winter prayers, like things you're not supposed to remember, but do. You lean back, belly full, thoughts swirling. This wasn't just a meal. It was theater, theology, and a 4-hour philosophy class with snacks. The stars begin to peek through pine branches above. A dog yawns near your feet. Someone is softly humming. Maybe it's Pirika. Maybe it's you. And for the first time in a long while, you feel full in a way that has nothing to do with food. You're up before the sun, woken not by voices or movement, but by the low hum of silence, the kind that wraps around you like fog, soft and full. Your last morning with the Ainu. And today, there's no feast, no ritual, no bustle. Just one final lesson: preservation. Because what good is flavor if it doesn't last? You follow Culinary and Pirika to the smokehouse, really just a lean-to with slatted wood walls and a fire pit kept burning low for weeks. Hanging from the rafters are long strands of dried salmon, duck strips, even slivers of bear fat, all slowly transformed by time and patience into portable, edible stories. This is how the Ainu fought winter. Not with warm coats or central heating, but with knowledge, smoke, and clever tricks passed down by mothers and grandmothers who could read mold the way some people read books. You help turn the racks, carefully flipping strips of seikitoi, smoked salmon, that have stiffened like old leather. These will last for months, maybe years. One bite rehydrated in stew and you've got instant nutrition, a burst of history, and a reason to keep going when everything's frozen. Next, Pirika shows you Nika, a method of root fermentation done underground. Clay jars filled with shaved tubers, nuts, and herbs are buried beneath the frost line, where temperature and darkness encourage just the right kind of decay. Historians still argue whether the flavor changes are intentional or just a byproduct. Some call it controlled rot. Others insist it's divine intuition. You try a piece. It's chewy, sour, with a lingering sweetness that fades like a dream. It's weirdly addictive. Then there's saito, small millet dumplings originally eaten fresh but also dried rock hard for storage. Once dried, they're dunked into hot broth until they puff back up. You bite into one. Still soft in the middle, but with edges that remember how long they waited for you. Quirky detail. Some Ainu stored food in the hollowed-out skulls of deer. Not for creep factor, though it's undeniably intense, but because they believed the animal's spirit helped guard the provisions. Like a sacred Tupperware. You glance nervously at one perched nearby. It seems mildly judgmental. You help prepare bundles of dried greens tied with twine made from nettle stalks. These will be thrown into soup pots like tea bags months from now, unfurling all their late summer vitality in midwinter kitchens. And over a small fire, Culinary teaches you the final preservation technique, fat rendering. A slab of bear meat sizzles in a flat clay pan. Fat rises, pools, and is skimmed into birch bark containers sealed with ash paste. This rendered fat, to kari, was essential. Ainu mixed it with dried berries, smoked fish, even insects to make travel food that doubled as medicine. You smear some on a cracker of dried millet. It tastes like survival, rich, smoky, grounding. You ask what happens if something spoils. Pirika shrugs. You listen to the dogs. They always know first. The dogs, sprawled nearby, perk up at their name but quickly resume their serious job of napping. As you gather bundles, jars, and bark-wrapped treasures, the fire crackles low. Culinary leans in and says, preserving food isn't about keeping it fresh. It's about keeping memory. So we don't forget. You glance at the drying rack, the jars in the dirt, the smoke trailing into the air, and it clicks. This isn't just preservation. It's resistance. It's holding on to identity in a world that keeps trying to forget them. The Ainu didn't write cookbooks. Their recipes lived in fingers and fires and the way pine needles curled underfoot. And now, somehow, they live in you too. You sit down for one last shared meal, reheated broth from yesterday, a sliver of dried duck, and a hunk of smoked root paste wrapped in birch. Nothing fancy. Just food that's waited a long time for someone to remember how to eat it. You chew slowly. The fire pops. Pirika hums something low and ancient. And you finally understand, this food is a map. Every bite leads backward into forests, families, and futures shaped by smoke and stone. You thank them. Not just for feeding you, but for teaching you how to remember. And now, the fire dims. Your stomach settles. The wind carries the last scent of cedar and spice. Time to drift. As the smoke curls gently skyward and the last echo of footsteps fades into the forest hush, your body begins to slow. The journey through Ainu kitchens, past roaring feasts, whispering herbs, and quietly simmering roots has left your senses softened, warmed, and full. The flavors might be fading from your tongue, but something deeper lingers. A sense of patience, of reverence, of listening more closely to the world around you, to the trees, the fire, even the silence. You've seen how a root can be transformed with just enough ash and time. How a sliver of fish, dried and smoked, becomes a memory that can nourish you through the longest winter. You've tasted stories that never made it into textbooks, only into pots and bowls and the quiet hum of a song sung while stirring. You've felt what it means to eat not just for fuel, but for meaning, for connection, for survival. So now, let the lights dim fully. Let the world outside your room grow distant, like mist pulling away from a quiet lake. Your breath slows. Your mind wanders, gently circling the pine trees, the slow turning smoke, the rhythm of hands preparing something ancient and good. You're safe now. Warm. Full, not just of food, but of calm. No need to remember every dish. Just remember how it made you feel. And as sleep begins to cradle you like a cedar basket, know this. Somewhere out there, under the same moon, a fire still crackles. And someone's still stirring the pot.